Travel Through Grief. Welcome to Travel Through Grief. I'm your host, Ellen Beckemeyer. You know, Father's Day is one of those dates, it just arrives whether we're ready for it or not. For some people, it's a day of cookouts, phone calls, cards, family gatherings. But for others, it's a day that feels different. It's a little quieter and a little heavier. It's definitely a day that carries memories along with it. That's what I've been thinking about this week. Not just fathers, not just grief, but influence. The people who help shape our lives and the things they leave behind long after they're gone. When I was growing up, Father's Day followed a familiar rhythm. There was always a card, always a gift, and always a wonderful meal that my mom either prepared or a restaurant that we went out to. At the time, I thought that was the purpose of the day, finding the card that mattered. My mother loved Hallmark, so we were always there. Picking out a gift that mattered, and most of all, watching my dad open it. As a child, that's what I could see. But you know what I couldn't see yet was everything happening underneath it. For you see, I was learning gratitude and appreciation. I was learning that relationships, they do deserve attention. I was learning that love isn't only something we feel. It's something we express. As adults, Father's Day began to look different. We start recognizing the sacrifices we didn't notice when we were young. We begin understanding responsibility in a new way. We see the effort and the intention. We recognize all the ordinary acts of care that quietly happened in the background while we were busy growing up. Eventually, many of us discover that the card was never really the point, and the gift wasn't either. The point was taking a moment to say, I see you and I appreciate you, and say thank you. Of course, I know this isn't everyone's story. Not everyone grew up with a father who was present. Not everyone had a father figure they could count on. Some people spent years wishing for a different relationship than the one they received. Others lost their fathers so young that most of what remains are stories told by someone else. Some carry gratitude, and some carry grief. A lot of times, some just carry disappointment. Many carry more than one of those things at the same time. That's one reason Father's Day can be such an emotional day. It doesn't just remind us of who was there. It kind of reminds us of who wasn't. It reminds us of what we had. It also reminds us of what we lost. It reminds us of what we wished could have been different. Yet no matter what our story looks like, every one of us came from somewhere. We are all part of a larger story that began before we arrived. Generations of people lived, worked, struggled, hoped, loved, and they carried life forward. Some of those stories are so beautiful, and some are so painful. And most stories, well, they contain both. You see, every generation passes something on. Its value, tradition, its faith, its resilience. Sometimes it's just a sense of humor. Sometimes it's a lesson learned the hard way. And sometimes it's a pattern that the next generation decides to change. I've been thinking about my own dad this week. Not the day I lost him. There'll be another time for that story. I've been thinking about who he was. My dad was actually my pastor until I was 25 years old when he retired. He's the one that baptized me and confirmed me. For most of my life, he was the person standing in the pulpit on Sunday morning, and he was the same person sitting across from me at the dinner table. At the time, that felt completely normal. Most of our friends, their parents were pastors too. Looking back, I realized what a gift it was. Now, one of my favorite stories, and it was definitely one of his favorite stories, came from a Sunday when he actually wasn't at church and someone else was filling in for him. And when it came time for the children's sermon, one of the little boys, he looked around and he asked, "So where's God?" What that meant, of course, he didn't know where my dad was. My dad was 6'4", so to a little boy, 6'4" is saying something. That story always made him laugh. I've always loved it too. Not because anyone confused him with God, but because it revealed something about the role he played in people's lives. My dad was present. He showed up for others. People expected to see him because they usually did. The children, they trusted him because he had earned that trust. And the older I get, the more I appreciate that story. What a remarkable thing to be remembered for. Not achievement or status or recognition, but just for presence. Simply being the person people were glad to see. And he was glad to see them. When I think about my dad, there's a few words that come to mind. Faithful, steady, and true. Those aren't flashy qualities. They don't really make headlines. But what they do, they build families and communities and trust. And the older I get, the more I value that. My dad also played guitar, and some of my earliest memories involve singing with him. Since he was my minister, he was one of the people who taught and led Vacation Bible School. And when I was 4 years old, he was teaching me songs that I still remember today. He taught me It's a Small World way before Walt Disney did. Long before I could explain faith, I was singing about it. Long before I understood theology, I understood music. I suspect many of us have that memory like that. Maybe it wasn't a guitar, but it could have been a fishing pole or a baseball glove. Maybe it was just sitting beside someone while they repaired an engine, or built a shelf, or worked in the garden. Maybe it was watching a game together. Maybe it was just listening to some records or the radio. It could have been a road trip and those conversations that happened somewhere between home and the destination. I know the details are different, but the feeling is often the same. We don't realize we're creating memories while we're living them. Years later, those ordinary moments, they become so priceless. That's one reason grief can catch us by surprise. It rarely arrives only through anniversaries. Sometimes it just arrives when you're looking at a photograph. You stop scrolling because one image contains an entire world that no longer exists. Sometimes it's when you see their handwriting. Maybe it's a signature on a document or a note tucked inside a drawer, or a birthday card you couldn't bring yourself to throw away. Sometimes it's a familiar scent, an old bottle of cologne. My dad wore Old Spice. A jacket hanging in a closet. Maybe it's the smell of a garage, and at this time of year, the smell of a grill on a summer afternoon. Well, I always loved his hamburgers and his steaks. Sometimes it's an object that once seemed completely ordinary. His watch, a wallet, a coffee mug. Maybe it was a favorite tool. And sometimes it's an empty chair. There was a chair at church when we went to a former church, and that was his. And I remember it would be before church would even start, and I would go in there, and I would sit on it. Not to pretend I was him, but just to kind of take it all in. It'd be an empty sanctuary, and I could see where he stood and looked out upon. It's the place at the table that immediately catches your eye. The seat that reminds you someone should be there but isn't. Grief has a way of living in ordinary things. Not because the objects themselves matter so much, but because they hold memories. And memories hold people. My dad died the evening before Father's Day. Father's Day was the very next day. He was already gone, and I remember sitting beside him in the hospital room, wishing him a happy Father's Day, because I knew it was the last time I was going to ever get to say that to him. That may sound strange to some people, but to me it felt completely natural. The holiday had arrived. He was still my father. The love was still there. The gratitude was still there. The relationship had changed shape, but it hadn't disappeared. I think that's one reason grief can be so difficult to explain. Sometimes it's absence, the way the day feels louder because someone isn't there to fill it. Sometimes it's just longing, not only missing the person, but missing who you were when they were alive. Sometimes it's just the unfinished conversations or the stories you never heard, the questions you never got to ask, the words you wish could hand across a table one more time. And often it's something even more complicated. Well, I think some of you will relate to this. It's love mixed with frustration. It's gratitude mixed with disappointment. It's comfort mixed with sadness. Many relationships leave us holding more than one truth at the same time. We can miss someone deeply and still wish parts of the relationship had been different. We can feel grateful and heartbroken in the same moment. And we can carry peace and longing side by side. That's just part of being human. It's also why Father's Day can bring up so many emotions. I think it's important to remember that not every father figure is biological. Some of the people who shape us arrive in different ways. Whether it's a grandfather, an uncle, a coach or a teacher, a pastor or a mentor, maybe it was a neighbor who took time to care. Some people were fortunate enough to have those people step in. Others spent years wishing someone had. Both experiences belong in this conversation. As we move through life, many of us find ourselves doing the slow work of understanding the people who came before us. We begin seeing them not only as parents, but as human beings. We recognize their strengths and their flaws. We understand that love and imperfection often exist in the same story. Sometimes that understanding creates reconciliation, not because history changes, but because perspective does. And then there is a question I keep coming back to. So what does remain? Because grief isn't only about what we lost. It's also about what remains inside of us. Those lessons, the values, the stories, the songs, the tradition, the laughter. These are the fingerprints left behind on a life. The influence that continues long after someone is gone. Perhaps that's the real invitation of Father's Day. Not simply to remember, but to recognize what we're carrying forward. It's the kindness and the faith, the perseverance and the humor, the wisdom, the things we want to continue, what we want to improve, the things we hope to pass along to someone else. So wherever you're listening from today, I hope you find a moment of peace. I hope you remember the people who helped shape your life. I do hope you give yourself permission to feel whatever this day brings. And most of all, I hope you remember that love doesn't disappear. It does become a memory, and it does become story. And most of all, it becomes legacy. And it becomes part of who we are. May you find your own way to honor that connection today, and may that be enough. Happy Father's Day. If this episode connected with you, I'd love for you to follow our podcast, leave a review, or share it with someone who may need it. Those small actions truly help new podcasts like Travel Through Grief grow and reach more people. And thank you to everyone who has already listened, rated, reviewed, and supported this journey. I appreciate you more than you know. Until next time, keep finding your way forward.